Well, indeed, today we are discussing a very important topic, talking about the statements made by the president of Ukraine. Once again, very briefly, what he stated is that the first combat use of a Ukrainian ballistic missile is possible as early as this autumn. I will ask you, perhaps it's banal for some, but still, to what extent could this change the situation on the battlefield and in the sky?
It will increase our chances of pressuring Russia to conclude a peace agreement. In my opinion, it will be temporary, but at the very least, a freezing of the conflict could occur because every day the economy of both one country and the other is being destroyed. Therefore, this is a real chance, let's say, to show that we have the same thing, to apply all of this and pressure the Russian leadership to finally sit down at the negotiating table and not push their own terms, which will not be accepted by Ukraine.
That's right.
And Valery, on the other hand, how much can Ukrainian ballistics compete right now with the ballistics that the Russian Federation has? In fact, these are just analogs of the Soviet Union. What is the advantage?
Look, we can't say for sure right now what the advantage will be until there is scaling and hit statistics. That is, right now, they're the first test trials. That Sapsan, which was called GRIM, the GRIM project, right? Then the fluorine monophosphide 9. So these things, they need to prove themselves and show how many hits there will be, how many failures, what the statistics are for accurate arrival, and so on. If we're talking about competitiveness, then we need to understand that we have, well, similar technologies. And here the question is essentially about Western-made guidance systems, inertial systems, about accurately receiving information from Western satellites, because we don't have our own constellation for delivering more precise strikes. Because the technologies that Russia uses are mainly from the 80s and 90s of the last century, but they have developed their own component base. It's old, but let's say the S-300, S-400, which were developed and are used mainly for as air defense systems, they're using them as ballistics, and it's inaccurate accordingly because it was designed to fly via a surface-to-air program for shooting down aerial targets. They just modified it a little bit so that it would strike, descend to the ground, and cause its destruction. But nevertheless, it is not such a high-precision weapon. We are planning and doing all this so that it has more accurate, more precise targeting accordingly, using new Western guidance systems, inertial systems, and so on.
Exactly. Yes, you mentioned Western systems, but in this context, I want to ask a follow-up to my own first question. The president of Ukraine said that to launch mass production, yes, Ukraine still needs foreign components and stable supplies. I want to ask you, how critical does the dependence of Ukrainian missile production on foreign technologies remain, really?
You need to understand that we can produce and scale up missiles, tooling, and, that sort of thing. There are no engines yet, although there are serious statements from companies in this regard. But nevertheless, scaling up to N0 is a big challenge. Fuel. A plan is being built, and there is a decision from the Danish government. So this would be our plant, a Ukrainian one. So as for electronics, naturally, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, no one invested in large plants for the production of chips and other electronics. And there are, moreover, we had guidance systems in principle, well, and we still have, but there's, let's say, radionics and other companies. But nevertheless, scaling and using Western guidance systems is a critical matter. I was recently, talking with the company 5 Point. We were discussing some inertial systems that we use in our projects. They're already criticizing these systems. They've worked them out. In principle, we use this for surface and underwater stuff, and they use it for missiles. But nevertheless, they have already tested some cool systems that we thought were all okay. We'll see how it works for us. But they are already criticizing. So, well, it's not that simple. in principle, to quickly make both ballistics and anti-ballistics. It is based on one approach. That is, the missiles are similar, just bigger, and there's a different type of operation. But nevertheless, once again, what you were saying, the dependence on Western components is very large, and in the near future, it'll be critical.
Uh-huh.
Valerie, and what about the Sapsan OTRK? After all, this is also a ballistic missile of Ukrainian production, designed back in the 2000s, 2010, I think, 2013. Could this also be a supplement or an alternative to faster production directly in Ukraine?
Look, the developers there are state-owned enterprises. Well, there is a private partnership there, but they are state-owned enterprises. State-owned enterprises will always work slower than private companies. But nevertheless, this can provide its own scaling. So the critical question right now is to scale what has shown itself well and will continue to show itself in combat use. Sapsan, a couple of weeks ago, proved itself. Meaning a couple of weeks or a month, yes, ago, it proved itself. There were test trials. Now combat use is needed. And after that comes, if everything is okay, comes the call for scaling. Scaling doesn't just depend on us and our companies, but as we said in the first question, it's the delivery on time of a large quantity of components and the production of very complex solutions, components that will be in the rocket. And that is already a dependency on subcontractors. Just the same, look, the dependency on subcontractors, like in the Patriot, meaning there are 180 or more companies participating in production. There's a very large, diverse situation with the supply of various kinds of parts. And we will have exactly the same thing. And that's why it might be less, because we're making it simpler and we want it faster and cheaper. But nevertheless, a critical dependency on any single part, it poses a challenge for scaling. Therefore, in parallel, if these projects are running and there is this positive competition and a race to see who can do more, like Firepoint right now, like UseMash, Use Design Office, Luch, we haven't heard everything yet, regarding these developments, right? This is him participating in other projects. Therefore, the more of these various types of missiles there are, and successful ones at that, and the faster companies scale up, the faster we will provide a worthy response to the enemy.
Valerie, I wanted to ask a different question, but a lot of updated information has been appearing since this morning. I just opened this morning's press. Let's say the Atlantic publication. I'm looking here, the American manufacturers of Patriot, and I'm quoting verbatim here, they are afraid that, I want to be realistic right now, okay? No illusions here, nothing like that. But I am quoting verbatim that they are afraid. The American manufacturers of Patriot are afraid that Ukraine will be able to produce them cheaper and faster. So that's the story. That's why these companies, quoting further, are in no hurry to transfer to Ukraine, yes, the licenses. And one of those who agreed to speak with Atlantic analysts on Capitol Hill explained these fears by saying that Ukrainians might even improve the system and set up mass production significantly cheaper than in the United States of America. But, on the other hand, negotiations regarding the localization of Patriot production for Ukraine are still ongoing. I understand that someone might say, no, well, that's just someone on Capitol Hill deciding to play with words a bit, perhaps. But on the other hand, I'm even more interested in this transfer of licenses, right? What would you attribute that to? Why is it that Trump says yes one moment, and then it seems like Trump says no the next? And to what extent could this really change the situation in the entire global market for Patriot production?
You need to understand that it's not just Trump who decides whether there will be a license or not. This is a private company. This is their property. Trump comes and goes. Presidents come and go. These companies have worked, are working, and will continue to work. They have huge orders, they have waiting lists, and everyone is chasing after their technology. Transferring technology to another country is always a challenge for a company. They have to find an answer for themselves. Why are we doing this? I mean, we're doing fine as it is. We can scale it up ourselves. And will another country be able to do it without creating something similar after they've studied this technology? That is always a factor in this. That is, in making the decision. And companies, naturally, they have to weigh everything very carefully because this is their
Right.
product. Well, one of the most important products that they work with.
Uh-huh.
And so to say that this is easy for companies, that's not true. Because the transfer, the preparation of the documents themselves, the restrictive clauses in the contracts must be very carefully written so that the company is protected, so that it doesn't, let's say, raise a competitor for itself. And this is happening all over the world, all the time, huh? Especially with our experience in the production of ballistic and anti-ballistic components back in the Soviet Union. We still have our rocket scientists. Yes, they are getting on in years, but nevertheless, the experience is there. And those who can work with this, both companies and state enterprises, they have remained. And there is huge potential. Therefore, it will be very difficult, I must tell you, to legally obtain such permits.